going against the Nats. So you can get cheap strikeout upside without having to go up against the Dodgers. So I'll still get the Snell because he is cheap. I probably just end up being around the field or a little bit lower. As far as the Dodgers go, I like getting there because Snell is pulling some ownership. The Dodgers aren't getting much ownership. They're a really, really good offense. And Snell is prone to walk a lot of guys and give up home runs.
Oh, good. Perfect. Adam was just in the middle. Adam just kept rolling. Oh, man. It's okay. I know. Literally just lost the stream. Interesting. Oh, we are? So I shouldn't say stupid things right now? That's what we're getting at? Get canceled in the 1 minute that I think I'm off stream. It's a joke, by the way. Oh, we're definitely frozen. I could start singing Frozen and really piss off Adam. Oh, are we on? Okay, we're on. We're back. Hello, everybody. Just hanging out here with Adam Scher. He was just covering everything about Blake Snell. 19% ownership coming in on him. You were going down the laundry list of points. We'll give everybody like 10 seconds here. 9, 8, 7. Okay, no, I think everybody's here. Let's keep it rolling. Blake Snell, would you like to recap a little bit here as we cover the last game of the night?
Yeah, he's cheap, has strikeout upside, also has a dangerous matchup. I'll get to him probably around the field. I don't think there's a huge ownership edge there, though. There are other pitchers that are cheap that have really, really high strikeout upside with Gray and Cabrera in the Marlins game. And it's a really tough matchup for Snell. So certainly we'll get some, but not going crazy on him. I do like getting to the Dodgers. They're one of my favorite stacks in tournaments because Snell is getting some ownership, and then you also just aren't getting much ownership going to the Dodgers. They are one of the most talented offenses in the league, and there's just not a ton of great hitting spots tonight. You have Boston, you have Minnesota, Cleveland looks pretty good, but for the most part, it's been a lot of like, oh yeah, well, kind of like this team, but don't really love them. So that makes it even easier to get to a team like the Dodgers, I think.
Otto just said, did you enjoy your 300-second timeout I gave you? You know what? Put user in timeout. That was fun. I enjoyed that. That was an enjoyable use of my power. Walker Buehler on the other side here, top pitcher percentage. Coming in number 5, which is kind of interesting. San Diego, of course, we know that they're a very, very good hitting baseball team. We've also seen some random upside from some unlikely spots here going up against San Diego of late as well. Walker Buehler, a phenomenal pitcher here for the season. Limits hard contact, only a 265x WOBA is really what sticks out to me. Nearly a 27% K percentage. This would be kind of a contrarian spot to spend your money too. What are you looking to do with Walker Buehler?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised his ownership is so low compared to guys like Woodruff and Wheeler because, it's a difficult matchup against the Padres, but the Reds matchup isn't that easy. The matchup with the Rays is, has its risk. The Rays have the exact same implied run total as the Padres do right now, and you're getting like 1/3 of the ownership going to Buehler. So I do like using him. We talked about like Castillo as a contrarian option. We talked about Giolito. I think Buehler falls into that category. He's getting a little bit more ownership than those guys, but he's also a better pitcher than them. And I do like getting to Walker Buehler here in tournaments.
So we don't have any of the lineups. We can kind of use our imagination and know exactly the way that it's going to turn out here for the Dodgers. 4-point floor implied runs here going up against Blake Snell. Not pulling a bunch of ownership either. One of the more highly leveraged teams, actually the most leveraged team that you can get over on DK. I'm going to continue to just play them in all of these spots, specifically guys like Will Smith, Justin Turner, AJ Pollock, Chris Taylor, all of these righties, Trey Turner, of course, all these dudes just in such a great spot. Even Max Muncy, I'm sure Albert Pujols will get the start and just ruin my life a little bit because he's 2.1K and I will not still play him. I refuse to play him at any point. But what are you looking to do with the Dodgers?
Yeah, they're one of my favorite stacks. Just, for the reasons I was saying before, where Snell is getting some ownership. He is still home run prone, and the Dodgers just a really, really talented offense. $2,100 Pujols, I'll end up getting to more than I would like just because he's so cheap. But one other thing to mention with Snell too, he's allowed 17 stolen bases this year. He was really good at holding runners last season, but that was pretty much an outlier for him. 17 stolen bases this year, 1 last year, 15 the year before that, 13 the year before that. So Trey Turner, always has tons of upside, but a spot he should be able to run. Anyone else that steals bases on the Dodgers as well. Bellinger runs a bit, Taylor, Pollock, any of these guys should be able to steal if they get on. So it adds upside to the Dodgers as well.
Trey Turner's steal yesterday, it's like child's play. The dude gets such ridiculous jumps because it's like, what are you going to do? Like, you're not going to be able to throw him down in spots, and stole third last night. It's just absurd what he's capable of doing on the base pass. On the San Diego side, you have some power that exists there. Walker Buehler, though, I'm not going to go out of my way to pick on him, but you can play Tatis in any spot, I suppose. 6.4K, probably not going to click on it now, but how about yourself? Are you going to do anything with San Diego?
Probably not going to get to too much San Diego. Buehler's just really good and not getting that much ownership. If I'm going to stack against good pitchers, I'd rather do it against somebody like Woodruff or Wheeler or Ray, that's pulling a lot of ownership. So I get a bigger leg up on the field in the low probability it succeeds.
Amazing. Anything else from this game?
Nope.
Awesome. Well, we did it. And now everybody's starting to jump in here. Sorry again about the technical difficulties. Sometimes YouTube just craps out on us, but we got the best producer in the game, Jordan Klein, able to handle everything there. Stay tuned right now. We've got Josh and Greg on Live Before Lock. Ben and I will be on the 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time PGA Live Before Lock covering the BMW Championship. He's Adam Scher, one of the best in the world. I'm Eric Lindquist. I'm okay. We'll see you guys later. Oh, $50 chat on the way out. Yeah.
$5.55.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I just assumed Eric was running late.
No, even better. And we are live. Welcome to MLB Live Before Lock. It is Wednesday, August 25th. I am Josh Engelman. I am joined by Greg Ehrenberg. We are here to break down the final hour before lock of a 10-game MLB slate. Got a lot to talk about. We have plenty of time to do so. Before I do anything, Sir Spencer DeKing with the big-time super chat on the way out the door for the deeper dive. I'm just going to assume you were trying to start Live Before Lock off correctly. That was not for those guys. That is for us. So thank you very much. We really appreciate you being a huge fan of the Live Before Lock show. So thank you very much. Not even a question, just a thanks to us. So we appreciate your thanks. Hit that like button, by the way. Those guys invalidated everything. Their takes were so bad that YouTube couldn't handle it any longer. So we're at 45 now. Let's run that well up north of 100 if we can. That would feel great. But Greg, how are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I've got a lot going on outside of just the NFT and DFS world. I've got my kitchen's almost done, so I'm gonna have an actual house to move into, which is pretty cool because then I don't have to stay at my parents anymore, which I've been here forever now, just waiting for my house to be finished. So that's pretty cool. And we got a good baseball slate, and there's a lot of ownership that's a little bit eye-raising right here.
Yeah, we do have a lot to talk about. I just want to touch on one thing before we actually get started. One, shout out to Jock Market for being the presenting sponsor. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Before we touch on stacks and pitchers and whatever, what is your stance on weather for today? Anything you've got your eye on?
As of now, there's nothing I've explicitly taken out of my player pool because of the weather. But that's always something also that I always keep an eye on what like El Negro Loco says in our Slack chat. If there's any games that he says that he's going to be taking out, usually unless there's any games where I'm looking at it, it's like, hey, there's like a 70 or 80% chance of rain, then I'll pull stuff out. There's nothing to me right now that's that alarming that I'm going to be removing anything. But if something gets to a point where I think it's, super risky later on in the day, then, or, as we get closer to lock and pull out, but there's nothing right now that's really changing my decisions.
Okay. Just wanted to double check because we don't want to go ahead and give a bunch of recommendations and then all of a sudden find out that two of these games are just going to go away. So let's do this. Let's dive in. And I think the easiest place to start is with the pitching. Who is or who are your top pitchers for today?
It's interesting because there's a lot of guys that I have kind of close together at the top. And my most roster pitcher right now is Robbie Ray. And I think that of the three guys at the top of the ownership on DraftKings right now, we have Robbie Ray, Brandon Woodruff, Zach Wheeler. In our projections on the site, we have Robbie Ray with the highest chance of being the top scoring pitcher on the slate of those three. He also has the lowest price on DK by quite a little bit of a margin. We've got Robbie Ray 8,900 on DK, Woodruff at 10,200, Wheeler 10,000. We also have Wheeler and Woodruff both picking up a significant more amount of ownership, which is a little bit curious to me. The matchup for Robbie Ray against the White Sox is far from ideal. And it's not like I have a crazy amount of exposure to him. Right now I'm at, let's see, I have him at 34%. So slightly overweight, but that makes him my most rostered pitcher of the slate. But I like him more than the other guys at the high end, being a Woodruff and Wheeler.
Here are my guys. Let me know what you think. Obviously, Woodruff and Wheeler grading out pretty well. Clearly, Robbie Ray looking good today. Two guys that aren't picking up any ownership, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. Zach Plesac, Lucas Giolito, 8,500 and 8,300. They kind of get there in different ways today. Giolito, obviously, with some actual strikeout upside, a tough matchup. Plesac, great matchup. Maybe gets there on volume, 4% owned and 3% owned. Not really pulling any ownership. Do you have any interest in either one of those guys?
I don't. I get they're low owned, but there's also just other guys that aren't picking up as much ownership as I think they should, kind of in this price range that I prefer. I'd rather get to Shohei Ohtani. I'd rather get to Walker Buehler for various reasons. And that's, kind of some of the decisions that I think we have to make on these slates. And the main reason for me is I just think Ohtani and Buehler are much better pitchers than those guys. And the ownership on them is reasonable enough, 11% for both of them. If it was a situation where, Wheeler and where Ohtani and Buehler were both, over 20% ownership, then maybe I look to somebody like Giolito or Plesac. But one of the issues I have with Giolito, well, twofold actually, maybe three. Number one, really, really tough matchup against the Toronto Blue Jays. They have one of the best offense in baseball. They also don't strike out a bunch, which is another issue for Giolito. The other thing, too, is Giolito has just overall not been that good this year. He's regressed in a pretty significant way from what we've seen in the last couple of years. So a 3.77 ERA, a 3.98 FIP, he's still a good starting pitcher, but he hasn't been quite the same guy he was in previous years. We've also seen a step back in the strikeout rate at 28.5%. And he's somebody who, as the years gone on, and he's had to deal with some of the, sticky substance issues, we've seen some of the strikeout rate decline even further from what it was earlier in the season. So just all those factors, the matchup, Giolito, there's enough options that I'm going elsewhere.
So I'm with you on the thought process for Walker Buehler, the thought process for Shohei Ohtani. I think they are a little bit underowned. Where I'm getting the ownership to Plesac and Giolito is from stealing it from the bottom. Pricing is broken today. You can roster any hitters you want. It's really not much of an issue at all. So I'm really I don't have a ton of interest in Edward Cabrera right now. 5K looks like a good option, but 14% owned. And I have very little interest in $7,500 Blake Snell, given this current matchup, 19% owned. So the ownership that's going to those two guys, I'm just reappropriating to Plesac and Giolito. It doesn't take me off of any of those higher ranking guys. I'm just not going all the way to the bottom because it just doesn't appear to be necessary today.
Yeah. So I'm going to disagree with you a little bit on Edward Cabrera. We could talk about that a little bit more in depth, just because he's somebody who is an unknown, except appears to have really good upside. Because if you look at his minor league numbers, at least from a fantasy standpoint, there's potential for just an insane amount of upside, because his numbers in AA this year, 34% strikeout rate, in AAA, 37% strikeout rate. And the other thing to consider too is if you look at his ranking on FanGraphs in terms of prospects, he's one of the best pitching prospects in all of baseball. And his stuff is apparently really good. Not that I've watched him play. I'm just reading like a couple of scouting reports and be like, okay, they say he throws the ball really hard and he has good breaking stuff and he has good strikeout stuff in the minor leagues. Then also considers price point at 5,000 and the matchup against the Nationals, who have, like 2 major league caliber hitters in their lineup at this point in the season. So I consider all of that. And Edward Cabrera, just because of the strikeout upside and the price, he makes it into my player pool, and he's my favorite cheap pitching option today.
So he grades out really well for me. I mean, I pull from Steamer, 26% K rate, 3.89 FIP. It's not as if I'm not getting there from a logic standpoint. I get how he looks. Mine's basically twofold. One, I just have higher projections to these guys that are $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 more expensive than him. And I don't need his salary savings, for one. That's what's slowing me down for that first spot. 2, he's averaging like 4.5 innings per start through his, I'm just making, like, I'm picking this off the top of my head because I don't remember it from this morning, but I think he's made like 13 starts, 14 starts, something in that neighborhood in AAA, averaging less than 5 innings per start. So I have him at 4 2/3 for the game, which is really sort of muting him and stopping him from going much further. I also think the Nats lineup is better than we seem to be giving it credit for. I agree. Juan Soto, the real hitter in that lineup. Josh Bell, quality as well. But Lane Thomas in the leadoff spot, 92 weighted runs created plus from Steamer, a notch below average. Hernandez, Carter Kieboom, Luis Garcia, they're all in the 90s. The only real problem here is the pitching spot and Alcides Escobar, who for some reason hit second, even though he shouldn't hit second for like a AA team. I think they're closer to average than it seems. It gets skewed a little bit because of Soto. So I'm not as down on the Nats, and I'm down a little bit on Edward Cabrera going deeper into the game. And I think that's what my biggest issue is, because the talent is unquestionably there.
Yeah, and certainly I don't think we're going to get 7 innings out of him or anything, but his last 3 starts in the minor leagues, he went 6 innings in 2 of them. So I assume that he stretched out at this point. His last 2 starts was 6 innings, and only 4 innings in 1 of them. But some of his shorter outings were earlier in the year, which does kind of change his. If you're just looking at average, pitches or average amount of innings per start, he opened the year on a really restrictive pitch count. So his first few starts in minor leagues, 3 innings, 4 1/3 innings, 5 innings, 5 innings. His recent outings have been his longest ones of the season, which makes me a little more optimistic about his length. But once again, it's his first major league start. Who really knows what to expect? And it's somebody who, based on his talent and his price, I'm getting to.
Yeah, I did bump him more than just like the straight average of that, because there was clearly a trend where he was going deeper into the games. But even if I get him to the full 5, I just don't know how much I need to save salary in this spot. Great park. Solid matchup, run totals look good. I don't really have anything negative to say about him. I just find that I can spend a little bit more. It doesn't make a difference to my lineups. And then I get, Luke Giolito in this particular case, or even Walker Buehler at 11% ownership, which is kind of surprising to me. Tough matchup against the Pods either way.
And by the way, for me, getting overweight to Edward Cabrera means that the field is rostering him at 12% right now, and I have him at 18%. So it's not like it's that's enough to make him my most rostered cheap pitcher on the slate. Because like you said, I didn't really need to go that cheap that often. My most rostered pitchers today, it's Robbie Ray, Shohei Ohtani, and Walker Buehler.
Talk to me a little bit about Blake Snell in the ballpark at 20% ownership. Feels a tad high to me. Another guy where he does not go deep into games, basically ever, has massive strikeout upside, but just not a guy that I'm interested to go to when he's getting this kind of ownership. The price works, but again, I don't need his savings. Are you getting to Snell?
I have him in 1% of my lineups right now. And if I'm to rerun, I have a feeling there's probably a better chance it goes down than it goes up. I mean, he's been bad this year, and he's had some starts as of late that have gotten a little better. He has significant home road splits this year. He's pitched much better at home than he has on the road, but still his numbers overall for the year, he's a 4.82 ERA, a 5.61 expected ERA. Like you said, in terms of length, he hasn't been able to pitch deep into games because of 13.7% walk rate. He's also still striking out a lot of guys with a 29.3% K rate, although that is significantly down from what we saw from him during his last few years in Tampa Bay. But still, I mean, Blake Snell seems kind of broken right now. Also, his velocity is much lower than it's been in the last few years. You would have thought going to the National League that we'd be able to see a strikeout rate at the very least, maintain when he gets to face a pitcher instead of a DH. Also, not going to be pitching in the AL East anymore, which is the toughest hitting division that any pitcher could be in. And I don't really know what's gone wrong with him, but the results just haven't been there this year. And he continually kind of starts to get a lot of ownership. So the Dodgers are actually one of my favorite stacks for the slate.
You and me both, and we're definitely going to get to those guys in a bit. But everything you said about Snell is how I feel. I don't want to attack the Dodgers. He showed up in 2% of my lineups when I ran my sim. That's quite a bit short of the 18% ownership he's pulling. To me, he's the worst option you can get to on the slate. The guy that I want to fade the most, the guy that I'm just trying to actively get away from. Any other pitchers you want to touch on that we think we should deal with?
Yeah, so I mean, the Walker Buehler one, I can't remember the last time Walker Buehler was popular. I mean, there's been a couple of slates here and there, but for the most part, he seems to go under-owned on a lot of slates. And it's kind of curious as to why. His results have been ridiculously good this year. If you look at the betting odds at sportsbooks, after Corbin Burns struggled last night, Walker Buehler is a fairly significant favorite to win the NL Cy Young at this point. And if you look at his recent results from a fantasy perspective, he scored 20 plus fantasy points in basically every single start now since the start of July. So he's been exceptionally good for a really long time, and 11% ownership. The matchup against the Padres clearly isn't great, but we've seen him in a lot of tough matchups against the Giants. He's pitched well. He's pitched in Coors Field. He's pitched well. He's gone and pitched against the Mets, who not necessarily an elite offense, but still solid. He pitched well against them. So, I mean, Walker Buehler, 9,700. I think he should be more expensive than guys like Zach Wheeler and Brandon Woodruff today. Not only is he cheaper, but he's picking up a third of the ownership of Woodruff, a fourth of the ownership of Wheeler. So, I mean, of those guys, he's definitely my favorite option.
Yeah, I'm really surprised by the ownership, although I guess it's just a Padres thing. I was really surprised to see Wheeler be 4-1 and Woodruff be just shy of 4-1. I'm a little lighter on Woodruff, but still my number 2 guy on the entire slate.
And Wheeler is a really tough matchup, and he struggled lately. Like what did you do with Wheeler and Woodruff? Because I have some pretty significant concerns about them right now. Not that they should be unowned, but I don't really understand why the ownership is as high as it is.
So I get the Wheeler ownership. He showed up in 40% of my sims. He just goes deep into games, or at least generally speaking, goes deep into games. Not the best matchup in the world, but there are enough strikeouts in this lineup for the Rays, including the fact that Ryan Yarborough has to hit, which I assume he doesn't do all that frequently. Brett Phillips has a 37% K rate via steamer, which makes me feel like I'm adding 2 guys together. It's so high. It's just kind of like a crazy number. So it's pretty decent from a strikeout matchup. Wheeler's good. We're in Philly, which isn't really like the best park in the world for home runs, but it's not bad for runs in general. The run total for the Rays at 3.6. I have it at 3.7, so I don't have much of a difference there. I'm neutral on Wheeler, but I did have Woodruff come in, I don't know, like 15 to 20% less, like in like a relative number, not like just subtracting 20% from 37 as that main pitcher. So I'm under the field on Woodruff, a guy that I'd probably get to in like the 25 to 30% range when all is said and done, but he still grades out as my number 1 arm. Ray, a very, very close third, just behind Woodruff.
Yeah, the recent results for Wheeler have not been great, like I've said before. So Wheeler scored under 18 DraftKings points now in 4 of his last 5 starts. And if you look at his strikeout numbers in the second half of the year, he's never been a guy who struck out a lot of hitters. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere this year, he elevated his game to the point where he became like a much better strikeout pitcher. First half of the year, 30.8% K rate, 25.1% in the second half of the season. The walk rate has still remained good. I'm just a little concerned that fatigue is an issue here. I have similar concerns with Brandon Woodruff, 2 pitchers who have overall had really good seasons. I still think are good pitchers, but just relative to the amount of options on the slate, I just don't want to get to Zach Wheeler at 40% or Brandon Woodruff at 35%, because like I said, Zach Wheeler, a guy who's never had this high of a strikeout rate, and all of a sudden it's starting to regress and it's much lower in the second half of the season. It just kind of raises some red flags for me.
Do I need to change my shirt so everybody shuts up?
I don't know what it is about the way it picks up on your camera, except you like kind of blend into your wall. The people just want to see you take your shirt off, Josh.
I mean, I'm very certainly not taking my shirt off on the stream. That's not happening. You guys are looking for OnlyFans, or at least you used to be, until they neutered everything that was good about it. But that's neither here nor there. Maybe I will change it. I don't know. I'd rather just irritate people for 45 minutes. So do we want to talk about any other pitchers?
Yeah, so the same thing I'm going to mention with Brandon Woodruff that I said about Zach Wheeler. Second half of the season, he's just not been as good as he was in the first half, and we've seen a little bit of decline in strikeouts, particularly in the month of August. By the way, I don't know if Josh is on camera right now, but he's gone to change his shirt, and unfortunately, he's not getting undressed on camera. But what can we do? But so Brandon Woodruff this year, overall, very good results. But his second half of the year, the strikeout rate has declined, and it's steadily declined over the last few months. So May, 32% strikeout rate for Woodruff. June, 29.5%. July, 26.8%. And now in August, 23.4%. So just considering the steady decline, it's a little concerning to me that it could be a thing where he's just fatigued. Last year was a shortened season. A lot of pitchers didn't have to throw that many innings. And then when you see somebody, as we get to this later part in the year, the strikeout rate decline this significantly, it raises a lot of red flags. So, look at Josh with his new shirt.
It's a cat flipping you off.
Oh, there we go. It looks like an NFT.
If only. If only. I had you in my ear. I was listening. So
okay.
Feel free.
I don't know if you were actually listening or not, if you're just saying that, but any thoughts on that?
No, I wasn't actually listening. I was busy changing that shirt. You were right. I didn't expect you to prompt me on that.
No, because I was actually curious. Because I was curious about your take on Woodruff. But basically, I was saying his strikeout rate month by month this year has gone from 32%, 29.5%, 26.8%, and now in August, 23.4%. So my main concern here is just after a really shortened season last year, where now all of a sudden these pitchers are all throwing much more innings than they were before. I think some of these guys are just more apt to suffer from fatigue. And when somebody's seen such a significant strikeout rate dip as the season's gone on, I'm just a little concerned about his upside going forward.
Scares me a little bit, that's for sure. He's got the big time price tag, but I really like the matchup. It's the Reds offense that to me is one notch below the Nats today. I have them at a 99 weighted runs created plus. Nobody's talking about that. 3.3 run implied total. That's exactly where I have it. So the question then becomes, is Woodruff still the same sort of strikeout guy? Because you kind of need him to be at 10-2 today at the top of the heap. We got him at 37% ownership. He showed up at 31% in my sim. It concerns me a little bit, but I think we would see a Reds implied total be a little bit higher if there was anything to really look at. So the Vegas number looks fine to me. My number looks fine. It's hard for me to want to really roll him back too much. So I'd be happy to get to like 30% and be in and around the field. I don't have like a big negative stand against him.
No, he's popular. I'm underweight. I just prefer to get to Robbie Ray, Walker Buehler, or Shohei Ohtani currently for less projected ownership. And then especially when we talk about FanDuel, where we have Wheeler's 24.5% projected ownership, 26.6% for Woodruff, then 2% for Walker Buehler. These guys are all, Buehler's 11,300. He's 300 more expensive than Wheeler, 1,000 more expensive than Woodruff. These guys simply don't outscore him 20x of the time on this particular slate. So to me, I think Wheeler, if you're paying up for a pitcher, it's Wheeler number one, Ohtani up there also, just because Ohtani's only projected for 1% ownership. I think it's pretty easy to pivot off of Wheeler and Woodruff on FanDuel as well.
Yeah, Wheeler and Woodruff's ownership monstrous there. You have unowned Ohtani, unowned Buehler, Robbie Ray not really owned as much as he probably should be. Hell, if you want to take a shot on, Giolito or Castillo at no ownership, it's there. They have upsides, not particularly great like median projections, but certainly guys that can touch the same heights as the guys that are above him. So there's so many different options on FanDuel. You're only taking one guy. I find analyzing FanDuel pitchers to be like a pretty useless endeavor, generally speaking.
Yeah, it's weird ownership for the pitchers because we have these guys that are, all quality pitchers, but it's not like Walker Buehler should be this much lesser owned than those guys.
Right.
I guess other pitchers, just because you asked me which other ones, Josiah Gray, we haven't mentioned him. I didn't find a need to get to him nearly as much as the field, 21%. I have him in some lineups, but not a significant portion. I mean, when you have Josiah Gray at 7,900, At this kind of ownership, I'd rather just play Edward Cabrera if I'm going cheap at pitcher. I don't think the outlook on Cabrera versus Josiah Gray is that much different, but Cabrera is a lot cheaper, so I'd prefer him.
Any other pitchers you want to touch on?
Let's see. Is there anybody in the YouTube chat that brought up? Oh, we did. Sir Spencer DeKing had another follow-up question for us. He asked, who strikes out more tonight, Ohtani or Buehler?
I have Buehler at 5.2 and Ohtani at 5.6. So Ohtani, I guess, but basically a coin flip.
Let's see. By the way, so our player props tool, I think this is a good way to reference this also. So Shohei Ohtani in our player props tool, we do have slight value on the over 6.5 strikeouts for him, but it's because it's plus money odds, plus 115, but only 8% expected ROI. So it's not like that's a crazy good valuable bet. And then for Walker Buehler, we do have the under 6.5 strikeouts as being a little bit of a value with 5% expected ROI. I'd lean towards Ohtani, but I don't have like some sort of massive lean between the two in terms of who strikes out more hitters. I think it's about even.
Same. Schedule for the rest of the night. This one is easy. Coming up after this at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, PGA Live Before Lock for the BMW Championship. Ben and Eric, although for some reason I typed it as Beb in the run sheet. So Beb and Eric will be breaking down this weekend's PGA tournament. One of the last ones for this season. So you don't want to miss that show at all. Free content, MLB Top Stacks. Honestly, probably the most valuable piece of content that we have for baseball, in my opinion. It's the first thing that I want to look at when a slate gets posted, when we post our information. I think you guys should go check it out, whether Nightbot's dropping that link or whether you're just going straight to awesemo.com. I know Jordan's got it pulled up on the screen right now. It's a great tool. You guys should use it. Details who the top stack is, the top value stack, the current aggregate ownership, if there's any leverage. It should be the first place you go to try to get an idea of who you should be grabbing in an individual tournament. If you're trying to build one lineup, that is where you should start. Figure out which team you want and then move along from there. Speaking of top stacks, let's talk about top stacks. Who is your top stack for today?
Let's see. So I just reran lineups a few minutes ago because we got a Dodgers lineup. It'd be nice if we got the Angels lineup.
We just got the Angels lineup.
Oh, okay, cool.
No Upton, by the way, as expected, I guess.
So let's start with the Angels lineup here for a second, because it's a really good spot for them, obviously. Yep. I hate this team when Ohtani pitches because I don't know. Like Ohtani's the most fun player in the league, and FanDuel and DraftKings have totally screwed this up. When he the entire novelty of Ohtani, not only that he's really good, is he pitches and hits. It's really cool. And we're at this point in the season, I thought there would be some way that DraftKings and FanDuel would figure out a way, hey, here's how you could roster Ohtani as a pitcher and a hitter. Maybe he's really expensive, and there's a situation where both of his points count. Maybe there's a Ohtani pitcher, Ohtani hitter type player. It's a really good spot for the Angels. They're picking up a lot of ownership today, although I have to refresh to see what that looks like without Upton, because
he was driving a lot of it.
Yeah, because he was driving a lot of it. And that's something actually we saw yesterday where Adam and I were talking about the Angels, where it's like, oh, the Angels are way over-owned. And then Upton was out of the lineup. We got an ownership updates like, oh, the Angels are under-owned now. So I'm kind of curious to see where that lies. But that aside, Ohtani is the best hitter on the team by a very wide margin. And you stack the team, you don't get their best hitter, which is obviously a huge bummer. And that definitely hurts their ability to be a top stack and kind of messes with some of the data on this team. So I'm underweight to them right now, but I never really know what to do when they're in a really good spot and Ohtani pitches. And it's something that I have not really figured out the right answer to at this point of the season yet.
So here's where I stand on the Angels, since we should talk about it, since that's the final lineup to come in. Ohtani doesn't count. I think that David Fletcher was properly owned. I think Jared Walsh was overowned. I think Phil Gosselin and Iglesias and Max Stassi and Brandon Marsh were all overowned. So I have them sort of middle of the pack since we can't include Ohtani. And I think that they're pulling more ownership than I would like, mostly due to their prices. Clearly a decent spot against Chris Ellis and the Orioles. They don't tend to win baseball games all that frequently. So it's not like they're not in a fantastic spot, but I don't think the lineup is all that good. the best hitter is a guy that you can't use. And I think everybody else is pulling too much ownership just because of their price. So I would rather avoid the Angels. I am running a refresh on my sim now that we have that lineup. But prior to that, it wasn't looking all that good. Juan Lagares is hitting 9th. He's the flat 2K. It's not like he's going to be some guy that's showing up in 40% of my lineups now. So I don't expect much to change other than me thinking they are one of my active least favorite teams today.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still stacking them, so I wouldn't call them least favorite. I still have like half the amount of exposure that the field has. And I'm just going to have to refresh this now that we don't have Upton in the lineup to see where I wind up on these guys. But looking at some of the individual ownership, like Joe Adell is only projected for 4% ownership right now. He's been generally no good as a major league hitter, strikes out a lot, and that's kind of his main attribute right now. But he's still a very well-regarded hitting prospect. If you look at his minor league numbers, a lot of home runs, a lot of stolen bases. We saw yesterday he did have a triple. He picked up a couple of hits. So considering that he is a hitter who has a lot of upside, he's cheap, and he's the one hitter in the lineup that's picking up fairly low ownership at 4%. He's one individual hitter that I do like getting overweight to, at least.
Okay. We'll see when I refresh this, but I've been down on them most of the day. I'm really curious to see where their ownership actually ends up. Seeing them, like, I have a hard time believing that they are our actual top stack. Like, how far do you think they're going to fall in this scenario? Or has it already happened?
I feel like this is something I should have asked Alex about at one point that I never really thought about, because the top stack, obviously it's just, okay, this is the team's overall chance of being the top scoring team and most fantasy points and whatnot. But I assume that still accounts for Ohtani's fantasy points.
Feels like it does, right? Like I have the Angels 10th today. So I can't get them up to the top. Even if I just look at these guys individually, what's driving? This is a below average offense, even with Ohtani in the lineup. Here are the weighted runs created plus for everybody in this lineup. Ohtani, 140. Then it gets fun. 95, 86, 115, 87, 92, 82, 83, 80. I mean, we are talking about a significantly below average team. The only thing that's propping them up is the fact that Chris Ellis and the Orioles are one of the worst teams in the history of baseball.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bad Orioles starting pitcher. It's a bad Orioles bullpen too, which is something else that really matters more so than most teams. The Orioles, just their starting pitcher comes out, it's like, hey, guess you're facing just more crappy pitchers. They can't get hitters out. So, I mean, it's my overall most rostered Angel is Shohei Ohtani, because I can roster him as a pitcher, and it doesn't matter about the hitting aspect there. But all right, so I just refreshed my lineups, and I am underweight to every single hitter in the lineup right now.
Alex is in chat, said, yep, Greg, it's just the chance that the team will be the highest fantasy scoring team as a collective. So Ohtani not being available as a batter is a major hit. I have to assume something is showing up incorrectly based on what Alex just said. If Ohtani is a major hit and they're still at the top of this, I don't know. Like, we got to wait until the Justin Upton thing clears through, but what in the world would their top stack odds be if you could include Ohtani, if they're already at the peak of this?
Well, he's saying, though, it's the chance that they would be the highest scoring team as a collective. So I assume that still means that this is considering Ohtani. Am I not understanding?
No,
this?
His last sentence is, so Ohtani not being available as a batter is a major hit.
All right. I just wasn't sure if the top stack still, if that meant that we should be deducting that from their overall odds right there.
I'm expecting the Angels to tumble when we see this refresh.
Well, they didn't really.
Has it happened yet?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So the top stack odds, 12.4%, ownership share, 12.3%. So the ownership's come down a little bit without Upton in the lineup.
Value went up as well.
Yeah,
sorry,
okay.
Guys. It counts Ohtani for the top stacks. Okay,
yeah.
That makes a lot more sense to me then. And they should be lower then, obviously.
Yeah. Okay. So that was how I understood it. But
okay.
Yeah. I mean,
that was not how I understood it.
Yeah. I mean, clearly we're going back and forth about it. But yeah. So the Angels, either way, it's still a team. It's in a good spot, and I haven't really figured out the proper way to approach this team when we don't get Ohtani as a hitting option. And and they're in a really good spot. I have generally just not stacked them all that often or just left them out of my player pool entirely. I'm not willing to do that today because the spot is so strong. But individually, I'm not getting to here, let me pull up what my ownership is to these hitters. Like, I'm not getting to Jared Walsh at like 25% like the field is. I still have him. I have exposure to him, just not as much as the field. Phil Gosselin, 12%. Like, I don't have a dozen percent of my lineups with Phil Gosselin in them. So
do you have a quarter of your lineups with Max Stassi in them?
No, I did not have a quarter of my lineups with Max Stassi in them either. I mean, that's so like these guys, I haven't faded them entirely, but it's a lot of them I have. Like, my most roster hitter here is Jared Walsh, but it's still well under the field. And then everybody else is, single digits for me right now.
I think that if you take Ohtani out of this stack, that they are probably like the second biggest negative leverage stack on the slate. We've got Pittsburgh and Boston both pretty high. Both of those numbers I think would come down, could go up slightly. But LA definitely goes from negative 1.5 to negative 3, negative 4, something in that neighborhood. I think they're actively a problem today outside of one-offing guys in like lower owned stack lineups. I would rather have at least 3 other teams that are above them that are positive leverage. And that's not even getting into teams like the Red Sox and Minnesota, who are actively high stack odds, but are pulling some ownership. So I think we invested a lot of time here in the Angels. And it was quality information too.
Yeah, it was worthwhile. It was information we needed. And also it's something that, like I said, it's unprecedented. I hope it gets solved for next year because it's frankly kind of stupid. But anyway, here's the most important thing. I currently have 5% Angel stacks today. It's well under the field, but it's a number where it's like, hey, I have some of them.
I have them ranked 10th overall. I have them 18th in leverage. That does not factor in Ohtani whatsoever. So I'm very comfortable with where I'm landing on the Angels, which is a general avoid outside of individual bats in lower owned stacks, particularly if you're trying to go to someone like Jared Walsh or Max Stassi. By the way, thanks to the boss man for popping in and clearing that one up, because that's a really important piece of information for everybody. It's really good to know. So let's talk about the stacks that we actually do like quite a bit. I'm going to hit you with my 3 favorite stacks. I want to get your thoughts on them. Grab them in any order, whether you like them or hate them. The Cleveland Indians, the Philadelphia Phillies, and the Toronto Blue Jays. Take that however you would like.
Okay, well, I have entirely different top owned stacks. So I'm rerunning my lineups right now quickly, and then I'll know more so which are my actual top owned. But the ones I'm pretty sure are going to be my most owned are the Dodgers and the Giants. The Giants are still a little bit cheaper than they should be. And Talon Walker's another guy who, as the season's gone on, he has really struggled a lot, especially lately, even in some positive matchups. And we look at the Giants as a team. Chris Bryant's really expensive, but other than him, Brandon Crawford's 4,800. Every other hitter in the lineup is 4,500 or below on DK. To me, this is a positive matchup against Talon Walker. I don't agree with the price points, and nobody in this lineup is popular. There's 7% ownership going to Brandon Belt. Everybody else is 5% or below. Talon Walker's a pitcher I've been stacking against quite a bit in the second half of the year, and this is another spot where I want to do the same just because it's a Giants offense that generally people in the chat have brought up. I hate the Giants. I do hate the Giants. I have a lot of bets on futures for the Dodgers, and I traded for Max Scherzer and Trey Turner, and the Giants never lose games. But I'm going to be on them in this spot. The numbers for Talon Walker as the seasons have gone on, they've definitely been declining.
I have the Giants 9th overall. They look pretty good to me. I just see they're like a little bit under-owned for me. Happy to get there. Not a team that I'm avoiding or by any means. Talon Walker actually grades out pretty well in Steamer, so I think that's muting them a little bit. But yeah, I don't have any sort of issue with the Giants. So you named your alternatives to my 3, so we're definitely checking off a lot of boxes. I'm going to hit you with Cleveland to start. They are our number 4 stack on our top stack tool. They're showing up with a little bit of negative leverage. They are my actual number 1 overall stack, and I think that they're actually slightly a bit under-owned. So I'm going to dive into this one. 5.1 run implied total looks pretty good. I have that as about right. Jake Latz on the hill for the Rangers projects with a 20% K rate via Steamer and a 5.2 FIP. Those things not very good. Rangers have the 4th worst bullpen as per the projections of FanGraphs. I'm really happy to get to this Cleveland team. They're not fun to roster, but clearly Jose Ramirez, Franmil Reyes, the power potential on those two guys is pretty massive. The fact that Cleveland's getting to a 5.1 run implied total, given how bad the rest of this lineup looks, is really surprising to me. I'm going to be very happy to get to Cleveland. This is the team that shows up at the peak of everything for me. Are you avoiding them for any particular reason?
Well, I'm not avoiding them. I have,
okay.
All right. So I just did I have 8% of them, 8% Cleveland stacks today. So there's still a team that's popping up, fairly meaningfully for me. It's just not one of my most stacked teams.
Okay, that works.
Actually, Jose Ramirez is my most rostered individual hitter, though.
He is the highest ranked guy that I have for Cleveland. Yu Chang, just not getting enough ownership, 2,100 first, third eligibility. There are plenty of ways to pay down across this slate, and people are doing it in mass in other ways. Like Pittsburgh, for example, has the same has more aggregate ownership than Cleveland. Cleveland twice as likely to be the top stack. I find that to be pretty interesting so far. Next, I'm going to hit you with the Phillies. Have you looked at the Phillies at all today? Taking on Ryan Yarbrough, who is a much worse pitcher than I've been thinking he's been for the past 2 years.
So the Phillies, I have a small amount of exposure to, but I'm more in lockstep with the field. The spot against Ryan Yarbrough, I agree with you. I don't think Ryan Yarbrough is particularly great or anything like that, but it's not a particularly exceptional matchup overall. And the Rays have a good bullpen behind them. So the spot that they're in, to me, it's fine. I don't have an issue with it, but I'm more even with the field. There's other spots that I preferred.
Yeah, they Rays have the number one bullpen per FanGraphs. I think Ryan Yarbrough, I don't want to say stinks because that's going to be over explaining it, but projects with a 17% K rate via steamer. So not missing a lot of bats. This is a massive, massive home run park for the Phillies. There is a ton of power in this lineup. Real Muto, Harper, Hoskins, McCutchen. These guys aren't owned. Real Muto at 8% when we've got someone like Max Stassi at 25 today. Again, we touched on it during the pitching. There's plenty of salary to go around. And especially for Real Muto, he's an actual real hitter. I don't mind getting to him ever. I think he should be twice as owned as he is. I don't have anything that I should have to add for Bryce Harper or Rhys Hoskins. Those guys just, to me, speak for themselves. Similar story for McCutchen, 3,600, just not pulling the ownership I expected. Gene Segura, an above average hitter, 4,800 at second in the leadoff spot at 2% ownership. It's a great park for power. Ryan Yarbrough is, I'm going to say, a below average pitcher, projected 4.83 FIP via steamer, not missing bats. I'm really surprised to see all of this. I think that their run total is a little bit too low. I would expect it to be a little bit higher than 4.4, or at least that's where I have it. I have them as the most underrepresented team on the slate. I hope people are joining me with Philly today.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm about even with the field on them. It's not one of the spots that I went overweight to. I think everything you said makes sense, though. But the teams that I got to are just a little bit different. Like I mentioned with the Giants. And one other thing I'm going to mention about the Giants, just because I have the numbers in front of me. Taijuan Walker in the second half of the season, a 16.8% strikeout rate, a 10.1% walk rate, a 7.27 FIP, a 5.65 xFIP. As the season's gone on, he's regressed in a very significant way. And that's something that I'm weighing a little more heavily this year than I would in other years, for a couple of reasons. Number one, we saw a change in the pitching substances pitchers can use on their hands during the season, and pitchers only threw shortened season last year. They're not acclimated to throwing this deep into the year. If we start to see guys drop off, I think there could be potential for a little bit of injuries or just fatigue based on the short season last year. So those are all things that I'm weighing a little more than I normally would.
Any other stacks that we need to touch on? Do we need to talk through the Red Sox and the Twins and their over-ownedness?
Let's do the Dodgers first, just because you asked me about my top owned stacks, and I brought up the Dodgers. Number one, the Dodgers. This is actually going to be pretty simple. The Dodgers are really good. Blake Snell has struggled a lot this year. Blake Snell is somewhat popular today. That's basically the crux of it.
Yeah, I liked them a lot earlier today. They've tumbled a bit. I don't know if it's an ownership change or just a giant lineup change. I didn't really dig into it, but they fell a little bit. They were a team that I was looking at as one of those bigger leverage teams that ended up now being the Blue Jays, which doesn't make me feel all that great attacking Giolito, but he is prone to some ejections from time to time. And I'll never have a problem going to the Blue Jays lineup. It's loaded from top to bottom. There's power basically through the entire order, except for Espinal. Like otherwise, these guys are all like 200 ISO guys. I'm willing to take my chances again because they're basically unowned. And that's always interesting to me when we have legitimate high-end options to get to.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. And I am, let's see. I'm a little bit overweight to Toronto. Not that makes them one of my most rostered offenses of the day, but I mean it's a spot where we've seen this a lot with games in the series where the pitching is good and the offenses are good, and that's kind of just caused people to be like, I don't really want to roster either side of it in a lot of these spots. So I know you mentioned earlier with Giolito that his low ownership has you getting to him a little bit. I didn't quite get there, but stacking against him is something that I'm doing overweight to the field just based on, number one, the Toronto is a really good offense. And also something I said before about Giolito, he's regressed a little bit this year. So those are all things that I kind of like in Toronto. Whenever we have these elite offenses that aren't picking up much ownership, the Dodgers, the Blue Jays, I always think it makes sense to be a little overweight to them.
Man, I'm running crunches just to look at some Philly stacks. I love it. Wheeler and Cabrera, one-offs of Donaldson, Bogarts, and Schwarber plus a Phillies stack. Like you can really load up on this stuff. Or, you don't have to go all the way down to Cabrera. Grab someone like Robbie Ray, still fill in with guys like Jared Walsh, Josh Donaldson showing up again in some of this stuff. A lot of Schwarber as a one-off working. It's the type of guy that I want to get as a one-off. Anybody else you want to touch on here?
Let's see. Team stacks. It's actually Cleveland came up for a little bit for me, my most recent one. I still have the Giants and Dodgers are my most popular stacks though. But other than that, there's nothing I really have a significant amount of exposure to. We haven't mentioned. I'm going to refresh the top stacks tool, see which teams are popping up as really popular and which ones I'm underweight to. The Red Sox I'm underweight to. The Twins I'm pretty heavily underweight to. There's obviously upside in the Red Sox offense. The Twins offense, we've had them as being a pretty popular team for a lot of slates recently. I don't really get it. The Twins offense, it's fine. There's power upside, but it's not like this is a team that warrants being one of the more popular offenses on a lot of slates. So it's been a while since I've gotten to a meaningful amount of the Twins.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of interest given their current ownership. They grade out really well. They are my third overall stack, but they are my second biggest negative leverage stack. So guys that I want to get to individually, but hard to get to aggressively in stacks. I would be well below the field in terms of 5-mans if I needed to be. Let's give dong picks now before we go through position by position, because I think people really like seeing them. So, or hearing them at the very least. Would you like to go first or second?
You go first. I'm uploading the final version of my lineups.
All righty, I can do that. This one feels great for me. It's going to continue with my theme of what I like today. And the fact that he's pulling just 3% ownership makes me like it even more. He is third in my home run model for today. Give me Rhys Hoskins. Suck it, Yarborough.
All right. By the way, I feel like I'm riding good with this right now, just because. So early in the day, I was in the Slack chat and I was answering some questions leading up to the early slate, and they asked me for a run pick, and I gave out Paul Goldschmidt, and he homered in his first 2 at bats of the game, and I feel like I gave myself a little bit of positive juju heading into the slate. Where even if I get this one wrong, I'm just going to consider it a win anyway. Kind of like how he fudged with the rules of the 100 yards and the touchdown picks.
Fair enough.
All right. Let's see. My hitter ownership, who do I think is somewhat likely to homer that I'm overweight to the field on also? So it's not some guy who it's like, hey, he homered and everybody had him, or I was way. Let's see. Oh, you're going to like this one. Oscar Mercado. Considering his price point on, not that I think he's the most likely guy to homer or anything, but the 2,200 price tag on DraftKings, sitting in the middle of the lineup, favorable matchup against Texas. He is my second most rostered Cleveland hitter behind Jose Ramirez today. Mercado also only picking up 5% ownership. I think that's a little bit too low. So not the guy who's just most likely to homer in terms of this is what his chance of homering are, but relative to his ownership and all that, I think that he's going to be my home run pick today.
You were wrong. I do not like that, at least from a home run pick, but I do like Oscar Mercado as a play today for 2,200 on DraftKings. He does not grade out very well for me in terms of the home run model. I don't think you want me to tell you where he ranks.
No, I don't think I do the home run picks correctly. I just do it as kind of like, here's the DFS guy that I would like to homer based on my ownership to him, and somebody who I'm overweight to that I'd like people to roster.
Look, it's all the more sweet when it actually comes in. He is 121st in my home run model. So everybody, be sure to tweet at me and call me a dummy when that one happens. Just like, who the hell was it last week? I remember getting tagged all the time, and you and I were in the tweets. Who did you pick last? Can you even remember? Because my memory.
I can't. Oh, there was a stretch though where there was a bunch of. You know what it was? It was Justin Upton to not homer. And then Justin Upton homer. Oh no, that's what it was.
Okay, then it's more than one person, because Freddie Freeman, who was basically hitting for the cycle and then got the dong. And
no, that was my home run pick for the day, though.
Right. Wait, what are we? Didn't he grade out like sort of low for me in that home run model that day?
Oh, maybe. I don't even remember.
My memory's awful. Either way, guys, hit that like button. That will help us out a ton. We've got 15 minutes, no, 10 minutes, because I'm bad at math too, apparently. So let's deal with that.
One more home run pick from our home run model over at Awesemo.com.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Jared Walsh, he is plus 450 to homer today. And that grades out as being the best ROI bet of any individual hitter that hit a home run today.
He is 6th in my model, so I'm very much team Jared Walsh on that one. And by the way, it was whatever day that Miguel Cabrera homered, and it mattered because Dave fake bet on it in our chat, and I immediately ignored the rest of Slack for that night because I didn't want that.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing too is so Dave could victory lap, and you and him have a little bit of a rivalry in our Slack chat. He could victory lap that he
can't have a rivalry if you always lose.
Well, here's the other thing too is how could you victory lap betting on somebody with 500th homer? He bet on him every single day to hit his 500th homer after he hit the 499th homer. So he lost bets for like 2 weeks before he finally won.
No, none of those bets are likely real. They were phony screenshots in chat to begin with. So I assume that none of those things actually happened. Let's make sure that we get the facts out there. By the way, I can't wait till this gets to actual Slack. Either way. Jock Market. I got to talk about the presenting sponsor of this show. Very different mechanism than your normal fantasy contest because they have turned fantasy sports into a stock exchange. You don't have to wait till the end of the game and make money. You can sell your shares immediately if you would really like to and lock in a little bit of a profit, whether that's NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA. You can make real money every hour, every minute, every second of any match. And you can do it from your couch, just pulling up the app. Oh, so-and-so struck out. Maybe you can sell your shares before anybody notices that it happened. It's a worthwhile endeavor. Pre-game IPO, that is where you pick up your shares of the players. You can download the app in the App Store, use the promo code Awesemo, and get up to a $50 bonus on your first deposit. This offer is exclusive to Awesemo. So you want to make sure you take advantage of it right now. Use the promo code Awesemo for up to a $50 bonus. Don't let that free money go any other direction, man. You want to build that bankroll, take advantage of all of these deals. Whew. All right, we should be going position by position. We have 8 minutes to go. We've had a very extended discussion on stacks and pitchers, so let's move as quickly as we can. Favorite cash and favorite GPP option at catcher today.
All right, so I know for sure you're going to agree with me on this one. GPP, it's JT Realmuto. He is my most rostered catcher today. For
unquestionably
for cash games, I'm kind of inclined to still say Realmuto, but if you need to save salary, I'll say Max Stassi just because he's going to be so popular in cash games.
Yeah, Realmuto is my number one catcher in general. I think he's half as owned as he should be. Stassi is the quick answer, 25% owned. He's the most owned catcher at 4,100. But Varsho and Jeffers are both pulling ownership in the teens. They actually do rank quite a bit higher for me than Stassi. So I would either go to Varsho at 3,600 or Ryan Jeffers at 2,800 if I needed that additional salary. And I assume I would be going from a pitching perspective with Woodruff and Wheeler, or some combination of Woodruff, Wheeler, and Ray are, to me, the only possible options. First base, go.
Cash, Jared Walsh. That's, I think, probably the easiest decision that we're going to have at any position for cash games. GPP, it is Brandon Belt for me.
Jared Walsh is very clearly the answer for cash games. In GPPs, I'll happily take my home run pick in Rhys Hoskins. I think Yu Chang would also work. Lots of guys going to me under-owned because Chavis, Gosselin, Walker, and Snell are all pulling a lot of the first base ownership today.
Yeah, Sano, I have pretty heavily underweight to the field on. Christian Walker, I'm pretty heavily underweight to the field on. All guys that are picking up double-digit ownership that I have like 4 or 5% of.
Second base.
All right. Second base, it is Trey Turner for cash games and GPP for me.
Ooh, okay. I think Jorge Polanco would be my most likely scenario in a cash game. Luis Arias, if you need to save a little bit more salary, seems to work. Best guy I could say for a GPP, maybe Nick Gordon, probably Gene Segura, only 2% ownership. Both of those guys stand out as guys that I think are quite a bit under-owned and still ranking pretty high, but the ownership seems relatively efficient at second base today.
One guy I'll add who's sub 1% owned that I'm close to 10% of is Tommy La Stella. That's because of the Giant stacks I have.
Third base.
Third base, Jose Ramirez and Jose Ramirez.
Jose Ramirez at the top of the heap. Josh Donaldson for cash games, highest owned guy. He's my 4th ranked third baseman, but 3,600, you're saving $2,100 off of Ramirez. If you can get to Ramirez, by all means, he's my number 1 guy, but I think Donaldson is probably the best combination of upside and price, staying away from Phil Gosselin. Yu Chang, as I mentioned before, Chris Bryant, Max Muncy, Justin Turner, all 3 guys or 4 guys in that scenario that to me are going quite a bit under-owned. Shortstop.
Shortstop for GPP, it's either Corey Seager or Brandon Crawford, both guys that I'm pretty heavily overweight to. For cash games, depending on how much salary you have left over, it'd be either Xander Bogaerts or Ahmed Rosario. Those are the 2 most popular plays. I'm fine with either of them. It's just going to depend on however much salary you need.
Yeah, Rosario and Bogaerts are my number 1 and number 2. I think Bogaerts a little overowned. So, either direction you want to go in terms of the cash game shortstop works for me. If I'm looking for GPP options, Bo Bichette, Marcus Semien, and that's probably it on my end. Outfielders, name as many as you want.
Let's see. So for cash games, this is actually probably a little bit easier for cash games than it normally would be for outfield. Kyle Schwarber and Max Kepler, both reasonably priced, picking up a ton of ownership. So both of them for cash games certainly work. I'll also say Dalton Varsho, although you could play him at catcher or outfield, but he's also a fine option, but probably more likely to be playing him in a cash situation at catcher than at outfield. But for sure, the top 2 choices for cash games in the outfield, it's Schwarber and Kepler.
Totally agree. I think you can get there with like JD Martinez if you want. You mentioned Varsho, but I think he's going to be better allocated in the catcher spot. If you're saving a little bit of salary, I think Miles Straw works, pulling a little bit of ownership, only 2,800. From a GPP perspective, Nick Gordon, Bryce Harper, Franmil Reyes, these are guys that I think are a bit underowned. Your boy, Oscar Mercado, only 2,200 works to me in a GPP scenario, and I hope he homers in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, he is the outfielder that I'm most overweight to today, so I would also enjoy homers. If he just wants to triple twice, I'm cool with that too. But Oscar Mercado, other GPP options, Alex Dickerson, that falls in line with my Giant stacks today. Same goes for Lamont Wade Jr., both guys that I'm about 2x the field on. I don't mind your Miles Straw play, although I'm kind of about even with the field on him just based on what his ownership is. Let's see, anybody else that I'm really overweight to that has really low ownership. Mostly just the Mercado and Dickerson for me. AJ Pollock, another one that I'm overweight to just because of Dodger stacks, and he's picking up 3% ownership.
I think we're in agreement here. Cash game options for pitchers, Woodruff, Wheeler, Robbie Ray, some sort of combination of those 3 is going to be where you are.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't really like. I don't love Woodruff or Wheeler today, but based on what their ownership is, I kind of think it's by default. I would start with Robbie Ray, and then it would just be a thing, Woodruff or Wheeler, which if you have the salary, play Woodruff. If you don't, play Wheeler as the other spot.
Any particular guys you want to look at from a GPP perspective? Does that change for you at all for pitching?
Because
that's my please sack Giolito calls.
Yeah, let me just refresh to make sure I'm looking at the most recent ownership of pitcher, which I'm pretty sure that I am. Walker Buehler is my favorite overall GPP option at pitcher. Just the fact that he's still only projected for 11% ownership. Ohtani also fairly close to 12%. It's the same for FanDuel because these two guys who I don't think are massively different in terms of outlook compared to guys like Wheeler and Woodruff. We have Buehler projected for 2.6% ownership on FanDuel, Ohtani 0.5%. So those are two guys in tournaments that I've really liked as pivots to the Wheeler Woodruff combo.
Anything you want to plug before we get out of here? Because lock is going to happen basically at the time that I finish this sentence.
No, let's go Giants. Also, our draft kit that's going up on Awesemo.com. If you guys are playing in fantasy football leagues this year, we have a lot of stuff coming out. I'm writing articles on some of the top sleepers and stuff like that based on our tool. So check that out on the site as well.
I am going live tomorrow at 2:00 to talk a little bit about those draft kit features. Going to use the draft wingman once again, likely doing a Yahoo draft. We did an underdog draft first, but I'm going to do a Yahoo draft this time. So come hang out with me tomorrow at 2:00. We talk a little bit more about what he just plugged and use that promo code WR when you're buying it. Get yourself a little bit of a discount and some credits elsewhere. Either way, we are locked. Good luck tonight, everybody. Make sure you're watching PGA Live Before Lock at 7:30. Win some monies, everybody. We'll be back again tomorrow, as we usually are, going through everything once again. For Greg, I'm Josh. Bye.